आज का
तभी तो
एपिसोड नहीं सत्संग है. Hey, Jendia.
what is your problem? There would have been like spit of water and
Damn
other
it.
objects.
Just missed it.
Damn it. Seriously, just missed it.
But welcome to Think Fast. Did you spend the last 3 days just looking at like some what happened in Bombay? Like
Oh,
what
you
was
were
this?
calling me Zendaya, except saying
Jendaya,
Zendaya. Oh,
Jendia.
got it. Dude,
What do
she
you think I
looks
was saying?
so good. So good. Oof. Vataj. Lajawab.
Someone said that they put her and Tom Holland's photos next to each other in a meme and said that this is the original version of Badtameez Dil.
I don't know what the reference is because I don't know what Batamiz
How
did is.
yeah? How you don't know Badtameez Dil also you don't know? What is this?
I'm so sorry. What
So
is Batamiz Dil, by the way?
a song from
It's a
Ye Jawani
song.
Hai Diwani? From Ye Jawani Hai Diwani?
Oh, that movie that has Ranbir and who? Deepika.
Yes.
Acha, see, when you give me hints, I catch
Terrible,
on. You
terrible,
give me hints, I catch on.
terrible. Although
Yes,
my favorite meme of the
is
entire thing was, for lack of a better term, Mukesh Ambani asking Tom Holland to go dress up as Spider-Man because his kids were going to arrive anytime.
oh my god, that was amazing. His grandkids, you mean? That was
Yes.
that meme was aces of bases.
But
But
it's so
you spend your full weekend doing nothing but stalking Viral Biani and
Diet
NMACC.
Sabya. Diet Sabya. I was on
Acha,
Diet Sabya. I have to say this. I went through all the accounts, but I felt the good part of the Diet Sabya and shout out to who handles that behind the scenes. You didn't just get the pap stuff. You got genuine info about the exhibit. You got like, so you actually got to kind of almost see, and it makes you kind of want. And now since tickets are open, we'll definitely book and go. You do definitely want to go see the show. You want to go see the exhibit, and I also kind of, I mean, let's give credit where it's due. This venue and the whole way it was done looked incredible.
dude, I think just the audacity of it all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the audacity of saying ki boss, not only will I get Gigi Hadid, I'll also get Penelope Cruz. I
Yeah.
was just like, ye kya, like what is out of everyone? What
Yeah.
is she doing over here?
Yeah.
Like what star power does she have? Um, but it was insane. And if there's anything that we guys can, learn from the Ambanis, it's your life, make it large and all of that.
And since you said Gigi, there was that one pap who kept calling her Gigi. Is taraf Gigi.
What?
Yeah, there was one pap who actually,
Dude.
one pap actually said कि ये Shakira है क्या?
Oh my god.
But before I digress into what I spent the last few days looking at, what has happened this week? Has it been I've actually been out of any business news because I've only been doing the Ambani Gala news.
Lovely.
What has been happening? What has happened?
So many things. Our besties are back in the news. Direct to
Woohoo!
consumer beauty and personal care startup Good Glam Group has set up a joint venture with Bollywood actor Akshay Kumar to sell personal care and wellness. What do you think is happening over here? Because Mr. AK hasn't had the smoothest, swiftest ride in all things Bollywood, right? I think the past couple of movies of his have tanked after he went on his
Yeah.
like RSS Jhanda or whatever else.
I think it's time for Khiladi Cream.
Oh
Khiladi
my
Cream time
god.
has arrived. Khiladi Cream.
That sounds
Um,
like ball cream, Varun.
so Akshay Kumar is an interesting. He's in an interesting space, right? He could do no wrong with the audiences. He had genuine love. I would say that one of the interesting parts about just generally his star power really like going into the space it's at, and that happening parallelly with the pandemic is something to think about because he was that guy people go to theaters for. And suddenly he had to release some bunch of his movies on OTT. And suddenly, even if a movie comes into theaters, nobody really wants to go see it. So I think there's something there to
Yeah,
kind
fair,
of
fair,
dig
fair.
into and understand. But yeah, it's he still has genuine star power.
Hmm.
But is it a? I mean, unless it's like a very very massy, like let's go tier three, and beyond. I don't know how much sense this makes for
Yeah.
Guglam Group. He's not who we would think about if you're thinking beauty and personal care. Um,
Yep.
um, So yeah, I mean, I'm waiting to see what the brand is. If it's called Khiladi Cream, then maybe not.
Dude, I will say that Khiladi cream sounds disgusting. It sounds like, like some
I
ball
know.
sweat reducer type
Yes.
shit.
Yes.
Also, I mean, not that I don't want to be ageist about it, but he is quite old. Do you know what I mean?
He's
He's like,
older, but I mean, if you can
he
have
still
no
looks
one second,
amazing.
you can have like if you can have a Shah Rukh Khan and Salman Khan etc. do this, then you can have him do it as well. And I don't think that's
Yeah,
the
but none of
problem.
them launch face creams, right?
Shah Rukh Khan was in Fair and Handsome for a while, if I remember right.
Which was way
He
back
was
when.
way back. He hasn't gotten onto that train in a while. So maybe fair point. A little late in the day for him to get into this game.
Yeah, yeah. In other news, SoftBank Group has reportedly cut the valuation of Indian hotel booking platform Oyo by even more than its original cut, where it had come down from 10 billion to 3.7 billion, and now it's down to some 2.2, 2.4 odd billion. What do you think is happening here? Just general course correction for all things Oyo?
I think so because Oyo's been very silent, right? I mean, there was a point of time when you would get a lot of Oyo news, and just generally like the valuation was incredibly large and almost like touted as
It's
the
like the
Airbnb
Baiju's.
story, Baiju's Airbnb story in that sense, right?
Yeah.
But it's just seen this slide down, and it's at a time when hospitality is actually doing well in general. Like people have really kind of bounced back to traveling, etc. So I don't know what the deeper problem is, but I guess this is correction. That's I think that's the right word to use that you just said.
Yeah, and they tried so many things, man. They tried like OYO Townhouse, and then they were, trying to go full stack, and then they became an aggregator. So sometimes in
Yeah,
the pivot, you end up sort of diluting your, what I mean, like your original
yeah,
goal, original
yeah.
mission. But in any case, shares of technology, Chinese technology giant Alibaba have jumped after it announced a plan to break up the company. Mr. Jack Ma
Yes,
finally surfaced in
yeah. We saw him
China
again after
after 1 year.
years. Yeah,
Dude, wild. But this, you now chatting about this, but totally makes sense.
your dogs have lost it. Your dogs are saying they agree with Jack Ma.
Yes, Jack
Um,
Ma is back. My dogs are happy that Jack Ma is back.
Yes, but so here's the thing: most people don't get if you're not like hardcore businessy is that when you actually break up a company into multiple parts, it actually adds to your shareholder value because individual companies have more focus and kind of grow, and it just helps. And I think across the board, any company becomes too big, there's always a conversation about breaking it up into multiple parts, like
Yeah.
AWS and Amazon, YouTube and
Meta.
Google. Yeah, Meta has like so many, like break up Instagram and make it a separate thing, break up
Yeah.
WhatsApp and make it a separate
WhatsApp. Yeah.
thing. Which is weirdly at the time when all the apps started getting named by Meta, by Facebook at that point, then now by Meta in that
Yeah.
sense. So this makes it's great for shareholders, but it also kind of shows that it's not necessarily because of creating more shareholder value. This is just like I feel this has been the journey of this company ever since Jack Ma did that one speech, and it's just
Yeah.
been from there to here.
This is
I
just
guess,
government control, man. This
yeah.
is, the government sending a very strict message saying if you get too big for your own boots, we will break you up.
Yes, that's exactly what's happened here.
But quick
Um,
question related to this:
mm,
what's a signal that you think this sends to all the investors and entrepreneurs who were so bullish on the China story? Like I remember about 3 4 odd years ago,
mm,
the only the only conversation in the startup ecosystem was you need to be like a Chinese company, and every
yeah,
Tom Dick and Harry was talking about China mein log 996, they work from 9 to 9 6 days a week and this that and the other.
yeah.
And now this general haze that China had around it, and the mysticalness of it has dissipated and disappeared because you see the cost of building a business in China.
Yeah, and it also kind of shows that why democracies are important. If you have systems like these, this is what ends up happening is the fact that you bureaucracy kind of takes over and everything else. And so it's a learning to look at, okay, just because you can make people function like a machine doesn't mean it becomes a more optimized machine, right? You
Yeah,
need free thought. You need innovation doesn't thrive in like a factory system. So you
correct.
have to kind of be somewhere else. I think that's the big learning here. And which why slowly seeing that receding. Like it might still be the world's factory. There's still a lot of stuff you can't manufacture anywhere else at the cost and the scale that you can in China. But it's slowly not becoming as China focused. People are trying to either manufacture in their own countries. India seeing growth in just manufacturing coming here. You're seeing a lot of other countries in the neighborhood kind of getting into that mix as well. So I think it helps the general global, industrial system just for it to not be as centralized in China. But
Yeah.
also kind of it shows the cracks in what seemed like a unbeatable system.
Absolutely, absolutely. Speaking of unbeatable, Substack, tell
Substack is
us.
starting a process that's letting writers invest in Substack. They can own a piece of the company. They put out a blog a couple of days back about this. Again, like you don't have to put like major amounts of money, like $100 upwards is what you can kind of invest. Their whole point is because Substack also is not doesn't want to function like how other platforms do. It's not algo driven. It's driven by people can publish and they can charge for paid, etc. But they're saying if you're building this together, you can have some skin in the game. And I think it's an interesting
Yeah.
move for Substack, which has generally done quite well, especially for a lot of journalists to move there. It's still not as optimized for global writers. Like you still have to have a Stripe account, and if and that Stripe is not something that functions across all countries.
Yeah.
Um, but in general, for writers, it's become the default. Also, what's happened is with everybody else shutting their newsletter products, like there are a lot of people who were on Bulletin, which was Meta's product, or Review, which is a company that Twitter actually acquired, which is again like gone silent. There's only now only LinkedIn still has its newsletter product, but everybody else shut theirs down. So they've all gone to Substack, or they gone to options like ConvertKit, etc., which are more email marketing and not just like blogish. So I feel this is an interesting move for them. It kind of keeps in line with how they function as a
Yeah.
platform. But yeah, it's good to see. I think it'll be interesting to see how many people actually do put in money and buy some of that stock.
Yes, Queen. And moving on, just 2 months after car servicing startup Go Mechanic admitted to financial irregularities,
Hmm.
they have now been acquired by Lifelong India Private Limited. Terrible name, terrible name. But what does Lifelong do? You quickly did a Google search on
Yes,
this.
yes. So Lifelong basically has
Manufactures plastic products.
they're more automobile parts. So they're a Delhi based supplier of automotive components, plastics, and casting components. They do turnover over $10 million. Is what
Interesting.
they're around since 1985. So they've been around for a long time. But this kind of feels like okay, one second, this is obviously a distress sale, and
Yeah.
also is a scenario where this almost becomes like one revenue stream there. But yeah, kind of like the fall from grace has been so rapid in this one. It's you can't like just think about it, like before that due diligence piece happened, they were
Yeah.
doing really well from like an outsider's point of view.
But this has happened across the board, no? I mean, I
Yeah,
know we guys are going to talk about it in just a bit, but like Phone Pay and Zest Money. Now, obviously,
yeah,
those circumstances are very different, and not that I'm comparing Go Mechanic to Zest Money at
yeah,
all, because tomato,
yeah,
or oranges and apples. But I don't know, man. I think the past like 2.5 odd years of our ecosystem have just been so bad across the board, right? You obviously have examples as like ridiculous as Go Mechanics fraud, which
yeah,
was, like a LinkedIn post that happened and shouldn't have happened and then happened again. And I think we all very conveniently forget there have been other companies that have also been called out. Trell, for instance, also Sequoia back company, had some pretty aggressive allegations about, inside fudging of books and incorrect inflated transactions and this, that, and the other. So the startup ecosystem has generally seen a lot of crap go down.
yeah,
I think in Go Mechanics case, it hurts because they were a good service.
yeah,
And all things considered, sure thing, maybe not as scalable as one would want them to be, but you know what I mean? Like a product that had real users,
yeah. And I
if
think
not real warehouses or service centers.
and I, also kind of brings the question that everybody's being pushed to um again it's standard problem of like you have to be at a certain scale, you have to move towards unicorn, all that stuff is also killing genuinely good products, which if they were at the right scale and didn't try to go beyond that, a perfectly respectable scale. but not everybody has to be unicorn. I think that's really also where things are getting really killed.
I don't know if it's that, man. I think most founders, I would like to believe, have the intellectual honesty to know the limits of their own capabilities in their own companies, right? I think I think it comes down to like the way in which things transpire. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think it's at some level you have to have the self awareness of really what direction is this going to go in. Because I don't know, man. I don't know about you, but I just think the reputational risk is not worth it. It's just
Hmm.
not worth being in situations where your own reputation can be written off as an individual and as a company builder, which situations like this do. But in any case, because you're distracted and have nothing to contribute to the story,
Nothing.
let's
Nothing.
get to
I've
the
never
next
used Go
one.
Mechanic. I don't know. I like my mechanic.
Acha, lovely, cute. First Citizens Bank is buying much of SVB, the
Yes.
tech-focused financial institution whose failure rocked the boat this month. But you were saying, man, that there seems to be this
Yeah, there's
underlying stress.
I came across this article. I'm forgetting from where, which kind of spoke about the fact that a lot of American banks are in a not so great state of solvency, right? Insolvency rather, and that's so. This is might just be one of the first few that's happened. The financial state of a lot of them, just generally because of how. And this again, you go back to, it's that cycle that keeps going. Like go back to 2008, and what happened is just general practices um, kind of lead to these situations. So there is genuinely a fear that there's going to be a lot more banks in this state. But I think Silicon Valley Bank was also very interesting one because so much of the startup Silicon Valley side was really, a part of that story with the bank. But this is not the first bank you're going to see, is what at least the report said. I'm forgetting from where I read the article.
Yeah, and in other American news, more than 1,000 signatories, including Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and Tristan Harris, who's popularly, known for his work with the Center of Humane Technology. They've
Yeah.
signed this open letter that was posted online on Tuesday, saying all AI labs to immediately pause for at least 6 months. The training of AI systems that are more powerful than GPT-4. What's
Hmm.
your take on this? You are very like pro this news. I'm very like shady things have happened to
I'm
get these
not
1100
pro.
signatures.
I would say there is a part of me that supports it. Here's how I'd put it. Okay, let me explain why I've said I'm mildly pro. Is that any new technology, if the adoption happens too quickly, and if you read it, it's about not pushing someone to kind of catch up so quickly. Because what happens when you're trying to catch up, kind of also don't do a lot of the safeguards you're supposed to do. So the chances might be that it might not be OpenAI and ChatGPT that really have some issues in terms of how AI is being trained. Somebody's trying to catch up, might just let go of some of those safeguards and move ahead, and that's what leads to Judgment Day, as I always say, for anybody who's
Yeah.
seen Terminator. And it's that worry. So the
Hmm.
slowdown, because you don't need it this instant. You're seeing progress. You're going to move there. I know people are going to try and do catch up, but we are. It's become almost a fundamental stack of every single business and product now, and
Yeah.
that's a given. But the worry is in trying to play catch up. Are you going to subvert the basic training and almost safeguards that you're supposed to do? And I'm kind of agree with that part. Shouldn't stop it. I'm obviously. I think the shadier part is also like obviously they're doing it to make sure that they can also kind of
Catch up.
help. Yeah, they can kind of catch up. Although Elon Musk does own a part of OpenAI. I think one of the earlier
Correct.
investors into the space. So
Yeah.
interesting that he signed this. But I kind of see where this is coming from. Although the reason why they've all done it might not necessarily be as pure as I'm hoping it is.
Yes, Queen. And what do you think of Pepsi's new logo, man? What did you call
Dinchak it
it?
is Dinchak.
Dinchak. My God, just like Khiladi.
Check it. Like but I like it. I mean, the last few times they've done iterations, they've tried to do like really old school retro kind of logos. But this
Hmm.
one, I think, it's got this nice neon-y vibe to it. It's still a Pepsi logo, so it's obviously it's not like it's like something. Oh my god, it's a new logo,
Yeah.
but it's got a new vibe. I like it. It's got a little 3D-ness happening to it as well. So yes, I say thumbs up to this logo.
Cute. And I know we've had the world's longest introduction. So, ladies and gents, if you're sleeping, time to wake up, sip on that coffee. It's a Wednesday morning when you're hearing this episode. But what did you make of this? I know I alluded to the story earlier, but this phone pay Zest Money Bitwara that happened.
Hmm.
What was your like TLDR on this?
There is no zest in this money.
अबे यार फिर दोबारा थके हुए जोक्स थके हुए पापा जी जोक्स
Papa
but tell
J.
me honestly.
I mean, you've dug deeper into this than I have, but it's just one of those things, right? Is that as you kind of go through a deal is not done till it's done,
Yeah,
and there are always things that come up in due
God knows I
diligence.
know how it feels. Actually, God and Varun knows how
I
I
know,
feel. Yeah,
I know exactly how you felt through the process, but also I know that our diligence when we sold Glitch went on for 2 years. 2 years sat on that
ouch.
table, and it just became one of those things that you kind of figuring a way to get through it, but also you have to
Yeah,
clear run through every single aspect of it. So I think that period is actually the toughest one. So you should never announce but all of these things do kind of come out.
yeah.
Um, and just I'm guessing something kind of came up through due diligence, which especially in today's market, might not have been the best thing for one to take on. It is my outside reading on this. What
I
about you?
agree. I feel like had the markets been as frothy as they were,
Mhm.
maybe like a year and a half ago, this would have been a totally different story. And I don't know, man. I have a lot of respect for the Zest Money founders, and God alone knows what happened over here, right? Because you know how it is, man. You'll find like one row, one cell on an Excel sheet, which will suddenly, cause chaos and problems that never really existed before. So,
Yeah,
DD, especially in acquisition processes, and because we sold our company to a public company, it was a
yeah.
whole
Oh my
other
god,
layer of like
I
I
know.
don't even know what, man. But shit happens. I think obviously in Zest Money's case, the two things that came up was they had a very complicated ownership sort of structure because they obviously have some pretty fat VCs, figuratively speaking, sitting on their cap table, with what I mean, like
Yeah,
sub 10%, sub 5%, kind of
hmm.
shareholding patterns. And I think in situations like this, getting consensus is literally the toughest
Tough.
thing to do. So I'm assuming that would have been one part of it. The second thing that wouldn't have worked in their favor would have been valuation, because the deal amount, again, these are all rumor mills, so God knows what the truth actually is. The deal amount was pegged at anywhere in between 200 to about 300 million. Those kind of transactions in a market that's as crappy as the one right now,
Hmm.
that also for a loss making business which has high loan delinquency rates, because that unfortunately is the nature of BNPL.
Yeah,
It was just like a lot of chakras would have had to align to make this happen. But I feel like they've dealt with it like champs, man. I'm in
yeah,
a couple of groups with the founders of Zest Money, and very immediately sprung to action, trying to find their employees jobs, because obviously they're going to have to sort of trim the fat, get back to some semblance of low burn profitability, this, that, and the other. So
yeah,
tough situations, but I don't know, man. I think what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And
yeah,
they've got great founders, so I'm sure they'll
yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm sure they'll figure it out. And I know we still have a lot more to go in our very long introduction, but I think this is one of those episodes where we take a break in between our introduction. So we'll take a break and come back and finish the rest of it. And also, we have a bunch of stories to cover as well. So we'll right back with Think Fast.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IBM Podcast Network. Listeners, presenting to you Club Varta Lab, the premium tier offerings for our podcast. Here you get a number of perks, like access to extra bits and clips from the episodes, completely unfiltered, uncut, and raw. The chance of watching or listening to the full episodes 2 days before the official release. An absolutely free of cost entry to the Varta Lab, just us live shows. That's right, stories in person. Occasional live streams of the episode tapings on YouTube. An exclusive members-only Telegram group with Akash and Naveen. And you also get your name on the producer slate at the end credits of all the episodes. Wow, that's a lot. So go to youtube.com/Vartalab and click on the join button to become a member now. On the Wire Talks, Siddharth talks to internet policy expert Namrata Maheshwari about the recent internet shutdown in Punjab and how it affected the people. On All Things Policy, Saurabh and Pranay discuss the development of Nordic Air Defence Alliance and its implications. And on the Habit Coach podcast's Know Your Coach series, Ashton shares how he stops his mind from wandering. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on the IBM Podcast website. We have some exciting stuff for you. Follow us on social media. We are IBM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, spread the word. Tell all your family and friends. And don't forget to rate and review our shows wherever you're listening to them. You'll also find all our shows on youtube.com/IBM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week: LIC India, Yono SBI, Cash Free Payments, and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you for making this possible.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we're still talking about our introduction.
The introduction keeps introducing itself.
Yes.
That's what's happening this episode.
Yes.
But lots of like small stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like past week has been like boom,
Yeah,
boom,
lots of
se
like
samundar
interesting and small
types.
stories, right?
Yeah.
Spotify and Z Music haven't come to a conclusion in how much money Z Music's catalog is worth on Spotify. Just like taking a step back, in general, all platforms like Spotify have to license it from record labels like Z Music, etc. And they haven't been able to come to conclusion, which means that suddenly people saw all the Z Music catalog songs go off. And it's interesting that it was Z Music, right? Because till like some time back, they weren't necessarily the biggest player on the block. You obviously had T Series
T
being the big
series.
one.
Yeah.
Sony Music has obviously a long history based catalog. Saregama has all the archives, it's all the OG tracks. But Z Music in recent times has brought a lot of popular songs in onto their catalog. So it's interesting that they couldn't come to a conclusion. It comes down to the number, right? How much Z wanted and how much Spotify is willing to
Spotify
pay.
is willing to, yeah, yeah.
Yes, maybe it's the market talking. Maybe it's Spotify saying, "Boss, I can't pay you more than this."
And speaking of not being able to pay more than X, BlackRock has cut the valuation of Byju's, which is India's most valuable startup, at 22 billion, by nearly half to about 11.5 billion. And again, it's come down significantly over the past, I want to say 2.5 odd years.
Yeah.
What do you make of this? And they're not the only ones. Even Swiggy, India's most valuable food delivery startup at 10.7 billion, has been marked down to about 8 billion. And of course, you have Zomato trading at what, in between 4 to 5 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
Again, frothy markets
Yeah.
simmering down, or
Market. It's the market situation, right? And when when you're
hmm,
in the upswing, valuations are bloated. Funding is thrown around.
galore. Yeah.
And right now the market's down, so suddenly valuations are getting chopped up. Everyone's going into mode of like saving cash. So it kind of, but I think in Baiju's case, they also are very cash rich. So they can ride this one out. Valuations go down, they can also go back up. So
Yeah.
I think they're just playing the game because there's anyway enough news. There are enough news cycles around Baiju's at all points of times. I mean,
That's
there's
correct.
still that whole Unacademy news kind of going on in the background. There's that whole thing with Akash. So there's a lot happening always with Baiju's. I think just being silent and just playing and just kind of riding this one out is what I feel they're doing.
Yes, I think silence is needed in that scenario, because the last time they spoke, shit
May
storms blew around
exactly.
and round. But this piece of news is damn interesting, man. Only 46 lifestyle brands in India make more than 500 crores in revenue, made more than, sorry, in 2022. This has obviously been tweeted by our favorite, who needs to come back to Think Fast, Sajid Pai.
Yes, yes.
This was unsurprising. Like,
Yeah,
I
because
was like, totally makes sense.
it makes sense because when you look at um, a lot of the business that have come up, especially in the whole digital native space, um, they literally are small and medium businesses using digital as their platform, right? And I feel that no one's been able to. We still haven't hit that high scale value. We've spoken about this many times, right? Is that the actual what is that, the California class, is that what it's called,
Yeah.
which is 11 million. And you look at that and look at this number, you're not surprised because unless you're a very at scale lifestyle brand, um, how much can you tap into it versus everybody seems to be focusing on tiny niches within this market, and trying to get more and more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%, man. And, I think what would be interesting to do would be like a follow up of this. So what are the categories that have translated to this 500 crores versus those that haven't? But unsurprising. And I think after EdTech, the next industry that's really going to see clamping down will be, in my opinion, D2C.
Yeah.
And you've already seen that happen. Clamping down is a incorrect conclusion in the case of Boat and Mamaearth, because obviously both of them had to delay their IPOs.
Yeah.
But I think that sent enough shockwaves within the general sort of D2C ecosystem on how do you even make this $1 billion valuation make
Yeah.
sense?
I although I do believe that in Boat's case, it was a smart tactic because I'm sure they believe they can get far more value by just holding this one off.
Yeah,
Because Boat is genuinely like, I mean, just from a number standpoint, makes a lot more sense.
yeah,
The numbers are a lot more spot on in that sense. So I think they're just waiting for a better market condition to put this out, and they can afford to kind of do that.
yeah. No, but
But
I feel like we're saying the same thing, right? Which is the
yeah,
number of companies who can warrant that valuation will be
yeah,
far and few in between.
yeah. यस यस कितना सही चीजें बोल रहे हैं आज हम लोग कितने कितने व्हाट इज द वर्ड व्हाट इज द जीनियस वर्ड इन हिंदी व्हाट इज जीनियस नॉट
Uh,
शक्तिमान नहीं
Shaktiman, great.
कितने शक्तिमान हो गए हम लोग
Congratulations. Such a
बुद्धिजीवी
Shaktiman.
बुद्धिजीवी is what Jalesmi told बुद्धिजीवी people here hosting this show. Speaking of buddhijeevi, a company whose name will not pronounce because I always make it sound shady. You can say the name.
Estee Lauder.
Yes.
Jesus
I
again.
can't say it. I'll always laugh if I say it. I took a minority stake in Vairao, a British fragrance startup.
By the way, fragrances crushing all around and round. But this really is a market for fragrance ventures, man. And
Yeah,
they're all getting lapped up left, right, and center, and actually all are scaling fairly well. But sorry, finish your story.
that is it. That is the story. You can go
That's
on.
the story. Great.
Yes,
Should we go on to the next story?
please go
Which
on.
you want to talk about? Yeah, you watch JioCinema, not me, and I definitely don't watch the IPL. So tell us what happened on in the
For
IPL.
context, if you're meandering on today, both of us have had a very long Monday and we are like winding this one down. But stick with us, people. Stick with us. Like it
It's
all.
going to be worth it.
We
At
also
the
had
end, we will do a giveaway, and the giveaway will be you get a date night with Varun.
if that's what you're really looking for, you don't know what you're asking for, but
There will be one taker, and that one taker's name is Vishnu, who is not on this call today.
But getting back to the news, over 6 crore unique viewers tuned in for the Gujarat Titans and Chennai Super Kings match. And I think the peak concurrency was 1.6 crore on JioCinema. So, you know, I've watched the IPL on Hotstar for years. And I've been watching the last few matches on JioCinema. The genuine visual quality is so much higher. And if you watch it on television, you can see it in full 4K. I got to give it to them. They just generally up the visual quality, and in sport, the higher the visual quality, the more fun it is to watch because it just makes it seem so much more real. So full props to them. They've done a fabulous job of just generally how this going, and I think as much as Star Sports also put up, I saw this in the papers. There was this entire piece about how much viewership was, etc. You are seeing those numbers on Geo because they're also doing exactly what Star always did, is have the number of people watching there, right there. And
Yeah,
I was
for more
watching when it said
creation.
1.1 crore. It did say
Wow.
1.1 crore at one point of time. So humongous number, and it still withstood all of that, right? I think the good part of doing the World Cup on JioCinema means they kind of like, all the bugs were kind of like taken care of during the World Cup. And now they've like, was it the World Cup? It was the World Cup.
I don't
And
know. I don't see any of
the
them.
football World Cup. Yeah, but it's been great. And generally, I mean, quality wise, even highlight packages, etc. Everything else is spot on, and it's free. It's free.
Wow, so much
Free में
fun, so much
free में दिख रहा है क्रिकेट
fun.
फ्री में विराट कोहली
But
क्या इनिंग्स मारा.
Acha, okay. But in other news, ByteDance, the Chinese owner of TikTok, has generated more than $80 billion in annual revenue last year, up more than 30% from roughly 60 billion in 2021. I don't even know how many zeros are in that
That is
shit.
a Buddhijeevi company, Buddhijeevi.
Dude,
Using
full
Jalesmi's
fucking
word.
buddhijeevi happening here. But
Yes.
obviously, getting scrutinized in and out, up and down, round and round.
Yeah.
Specifically in the US, he also launched his new app called Lemonade, which
Yeah.
they say is a mix of Instagram and Pinterest and something else. So, I mean, ByteDance is obviously reporting very aggressive numbers, but what do
Mm.
you think is happening here? Two things. One, none of these numbers are quote unquote backed up,
Yeah.
because no one knows what their numbers actually are, and I
Yeah.
think the second piece is obviously insane scrutiny, right? It seems like they're on the precipice of getting cancelled. So where do you see this story eventually end up by the end of this year?
It, I don't see this. I don't see TikTok getting banned in the US. I know that's going to be a focus. I feel over time TikTok will try and figure a way to kind of become a company that's not as centered on China. It has to happen. They've lost out on markets like India because of it. So
Yeah.
in the long term, they have to do that. I think the lemonade piece is interesting because what they always had, and if you even think about TikTok itself, it started off as Musically, right? Musically became TikTok, and they kind of merged those together. And they've always had multiple. There's I forget what their music app is called. I think it's called Reso. So they
Hmm.
have a lot of apps in that sense. So it's a good way for them to still use their algorithm powers. And the thing
Yeah.
with ByteDance, they understand how to really tweak that algo, to
Yeah.
really use that in multiple formats. And instead of testing them all out like Instagram on the same platform, they
Hmm.
just keep launching newer platforms and making them go viral. So it's a very interesting strategy of not trying to overcomplicate one platform,
Hmm.
but just keep creating more and more platforms. So then you're not necessarily looking at one platform with all focus anymore. You're looking at multiple. So that might be the game plan, but they will have to at some point figure a way to not seem as China centered.
Amen. And guess who wants to be seen not as employee centric? Mr. Google, Miss Google, whatever gender Google wants, because they're bidding due to some of the Silicon Valley giants' famous employee perks. So
Yes.
no more free
No
food,
more free
guys.
food.
No more free snacks.
Oh, damn
No
it.
more bean bags.
Damn it.
No more massages. None of that.
आ जाएंगे. But can I be honest?
What?
It'll all come back. It'll all come back. Let them have a good couple of quarters. Let them have a scenario where Google's AI piece kind of progresses. It's
Yeah.
too, it's one of those things which is so connected to what Google is.
Yeah.
I feel this is a short term thing. I don't
But
think this
what a
will go well.
shitty thing to be connected to. I mean, I feel like in all of these
It's
companies,
a
I know
culture.
Amazon has a cutthroat culture, but because Amazon's culture is rooted in frugality, right? Like that's
Yeah.
literally one of their company values.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I feel like Google just become fat and bloated over the past couple of years, not couple of
Yeah.
years, over the past decade and a half.
Yeah.
And crap like this is needed to, crack the
So
whip
you can get
and tell
leaner,
people.
but
Hmm,
I feel some of the perks make this. So here's the thing, right? Many workspaces are what they are because of the perks that are there.
yeah.
And the whole point they did all of this is because employees would work out of the campus, is that they would sleep there, they do their
Correct,
laundry
correct.
there, they can use the cars from
Yeah.
there, they would eat there. And over time, they will want more and more people to come back to the office. And
Hmm.
the way to bring them back will be to reintroduce a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You take it away, but when you give it back, people might just come back to the office for it.
Okay, let's see if that strategy works. But
Strategy.
last two stories, and then we'll be done with our
Introduction.
unendingly long introduction that's
Introduction.
gone on for 36 minutes. So, ladies and gents, if you're still with us, we're telling you it'll be worth it because we're going to be talking about outfits at the
हाँ,
end of this
आज का
intro.
एपिसोड नहीं सत्संग है.
Yes, lovely satsang led by Sadhguru. VC funding for climate tech startups has slowed to its lowest pace in 3 years. So in Q1, climate tech startups raised about $5.7 billion across 279 VC deals, which is a 36% decline in deal value and a 31% decline in deal count as per PitchBook. This story I found interesting because climate tech was like the last bastion, the last
Yeah,
hope, like the last khula samundar of opportunities.
yeah.
But even this seems to have seen a clamp down.
Everything which will not make profits right now, which will not show immediate results right now, will start getting clamped down. It's unfortunate though, because climate tech work is actually what we really need as a planet.
Yeah.
Um, but markets are what markets are. I'm not saying in any way they are right,
Hmm.
but that's how they function. We're hoping that at least for all our sakes, that this doesn't last for too long. Is that climate tech does get funding, um, back to the pace that which was getting it before, because we all desperately need it. I mean, if you look at the air quality around us, we look at generally where the world is going from a climate standpoint. This is the time when we need to overfund it, not underfund it.
Yeah. True that. And finally, one in three. Why am I sounding excited? This is sad news, guys. Let me sound remorseful. One in three young Indians between the ages of 15 and 29 was not engaged in either education, employment, or training, as per the National Sample Survey Office's multiple indicator survey for 2020 to 21. And sadly, when it came to women, the situation was much worse. Just over one in two women was not engaged in either education, employment, or training. This is just like
Can I tell you the
depressing,
worst
man.
part? Worst
What?
part? Why are you really surprised to read this?
I'm not surprised.
Which
This
is the
was
worst
like,
part? Which is the
yeah,
worst part?
yeah, that is true.
This.
No, man, I think India's growth story will only become a growth story and not a infrastructure Nitin Gadkari story. The second we take women participation in the workforce and education much more seriously, I feel like until
Yeah.
that doesn't happen, this country is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And you see it reflecting across all indices, right? Whether it's safety, security, socio-economic growth, just everything from like child nutrition, this, that, and the other. Everything literally just comes down to one thing, which is how empowered are the women in that particular country with respect to opportunities and choices. And I think one small thing that I'll say over here is you can criticize China as much as you want, not you as in we, us, me, all of us. But I think one thing that you can't take away is that the participation of women is as much as men. I think over there it's like as high as 79 to 80 odd percent.
Hmm.
And dual income households are a norm, they're not the exception. That's the way the country runs. So lots to develop here, man, lots to
Also.
develop here.
So we're discussing a few stories this week. We cannot not talk about the NAMCC gala, the Ambani gala that just happened. I mean, we did briefly touch upon it earlier, but there's an interesting story thread that came up about the entire paparazzi culture and how that really came to be, because you literally saw it through the eyes of the paps. And so
Yeah,
there's an interesting thread that came up which we're referencing. Let's also talk about this amazing World Startup Convention, which turned out to be the fire festival of startup conventions. And if you have time,
that's
we'll maybe
about it.
dig into a few more things. I don't think we'll have time, and we'll do records and we'll be done. Paps and are also afraid people. Everybody who was at NAMCC, you obviously saw all.
Behen NMACC, Nita Mukesh Ambani.
Jealous me, you spelled it wrong.
Okay. Blame it on someone else.
She wrote it
Love
wrong.
it.
Actually, wrong. NMACC. I did not read it right, but nevertheless. But did you catch all the action the way all of us did on Instagram and Twitter and
Of
everywhere else?
course, I was supposed to be there in person, but I was all like, I cannot handle this amount of like
Imagine if you had
humanity
gone.
around me.
You could have met Gigi.
Oh my God, yes. That would have been actually great. And I would have been able to meet Zendaya.
Yes.
Zendaya, she's
Jendia,
so stunning.
Jendia.
She's so stunning. But tell me your little paparazzi rant slash thread that you
No, no.
found.
So first, let's talk about the gala. I think the gala deserves credit for just generally, and we spoke about
Claps,
this earlier, right? Just
applause.
like the way it looked, the way it was done. It was, someone actually tweeted us today morning saying this is almost like everybody forgot there was a Dior show in India.
Yeah,
And it's almost like you putting India center stage. You have, you got people from all over the world to kind of come in for it. My favorite was when Priyanka Chopra and Nick Jonas were on the red carpet and a pap, and Nick Jonas goes aside and the pap was like Jija ji Sharma ge. There is there was the quintessential moment for me was when that happened. But I think very well done. I mean, whoever's kind of seen the exhibits, and I've had a bunch of friends, and I know you've had a bunch of friends who've gone there
yeah,
doing this thing, and just saw the photos. And full props to Diet Sabya for kind of really showing all the exhibits the way they did. And really, I mean, you got a lot of info about it. Definitely want to go see it. But what for me was great to see is you're seeing a venue like this really kind of prop up, right? We always
Yeah.
had like we always got excited by looking at international venues, and all our venues seem to be slightly more scaled down, slightly bit more like like oh it's we in a different scale of things. But this
Yeah.
was genuinely like you look at this thing one second. This is Broadway. This is so many things, but very desi in essence.
Hmm.
So full props for how this was done, and I'm excited to go see the place.
Also such a well crafted launch. I mean, there's so
Yeah,
many people who've attempted spaces like this, right? Like I think
yeah,
Bizcraft had a space, I'm forgetting what it's called, in Gurgaon, which was a Kingdom of Dreams, which was
yeah,
supposed to be exactly this, right? Like a convention center for all things culture, art,
yeah,
and
yeah,
more. But I feel like if there's any family in India that actually has a money to back up
yeah,
patronage, it is the Ambanis, man. And
yeah.
agree with you, this is money well spent.
Yeah. And the other interesting part about this whole thing was there's a thread that kind of came up on Twitter by Abhishek Bot. It's at the rate Manic Monday, Mande. And he actually spoke about how the entire, because someone tweeted saying, "My eyes need a break from Viral, Manav, Yogen, and Wumpla," because all of us
Hmm.
were also like on those pages. And he spoke about
Yeah.
how this entire, this online pap piece kind of happened,
Hmm.
and how in the 90s and early 2000s, and actually it gave me a flashback to some of the stuff which we did in the early days of Glitch, even in 2010. Most of these guys would just be like standalone stringers with like cameras who would go to every single red carpet and take footage and sell them. Like I remember we were producing a show for Channel V in the early days of Glitch, and we needed footage. You used to have those e-news kind of shows. Like voiceover was underneath, and you'd have yeah, and you'd just show footage on top. And you
Yeah.
would go into these really like I want to like small gullies and one random house where that guy has like one TV and a lot of CDs. You're running through CDs to figure out what footage and what clips you need. And
Yeah.
he would burn that all onto one CD. For young people, CDs were things we had before hard disks became a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and that's how they used to function. To today, they run everything. The entire thing is run by them. And I think the interesting part, which Abhishek talks about in this thread, which everybody should read, it's a great, like he's written it really in a very interesting way, is that they would already try and sell their images and photographs and stuff like that to your tabloids, so Mumbai Mirror, etc. And they had to kind of wait for an editor to like even see them and take their photographs. But it evolved into a scenario where they actually realized that not everybody's going to buy the same footage. So they started going to places where they knew actors and celebrities were going. So a Bastion is a restaurant where people
Yeah.
go, or the
So popular.
airport,
Yeah.
and all these places. So it started becoming that. But how do you kind of scale and get employees? They actually found people who were just fans who wanted to anyway stand outside and look at celebrities. They just gave them a camera and just take footage. Also, I'll maybe give you some money. And that's how
Hmm.
the Paps became the Paps, because that's how you saw them everywhere. That they're there. To today, all the tabloids are dead. And these guys today, for you to be featured, if you're a newcomer, there are many newcomers who actually pay them to be
Hmm.
featured on their Instagram accounts and channels and stuff like that. So how the tables have turned, and how they pretty much like they're running the entire narrative. Like how what people are wearing to the airport
Yeah.
to take a flight, because you've seen it on Wumpla or on Viral
Yep.
Bayani's post. So it's a great. I mean, just think about how things change in the matter of like a decade, from being just like, can you buy something from me, to saying I own this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, one part of it obviously is the mainstreamization of PAPs. I think the one thing that I'll say is I find them to be reasonably respectful.
Yeah,
Like
most of
American
them are.
PAPs are horrendous.
Yeah,
English PAPs, if you
the
are on
worst.
Team Meghan and Harry, are like the worst.
Worst.
But I generally find Indian PAPs to be pretty, you know what I mean? Like they
Yeah,
seem
yeah.
like nice, sweet guys, man.
Yeah, because they're all like chill, regular. And again, they're all fans, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, I feel there is an equation that actors
Hmm.
have, and you actually see that. I feel the fun part for me is to watch some of these videos where one Pap is outside Saif Ali Khan's house, and Saif's like, bedroom mein aa jao na tum, yahan tak aa
Hmm.
gaya to," and everyone's
Hmm.
laughing, and they're laughing, he's laughing, and they all like go their separate ways. It's just that.
Yeah.
It's just that relationship.
And it's
Wo-
also
and-
sweet things like after shadis, they'll bring laddus and they'll give it
yeah,
to all the paps and
yeah.
stuff like that.
And we saw the video of Sunil Shetty and I forget his son's name. When the KL Rahul Athiya Shetty wedding was happening, they kind of came, met all the paps, told them, okay, they're going to be here, they're going to be coming there, I'm going to give you all this stuff. So it's almost like it was a briefing for all the paps, and
Hmm.
all the paps are saying, ha ha ha, over there, right? So I agree. I feel that apart from the Alia Bhatt incident that happened, which I
Which
felt
was what?
was she was in the balcony of her house, and someone got into a building next door and took footage of her and came online. And she was like, "Dude, I'm in my
Chill
house."
out. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which is
That's not
which is
cool.
which, yeah, that wasn't cool. But in general, I agree. They seem to be a lot more respectful, and most of them have. I mean, the PR and the managers of most celebs have these teams on WhatsApp. So this is a lot of this also gets coordinated.
That is true. You have all the insider access, but I am bored of talking about paps. Can we
Yes.
end this episode with the final finale story, which is,
The World Startup Convention disaster.
oh my
द्वितीय
God.
आज का कड़वा सच.
Are you okay? Today you are really oscillating in between Viral Biyani and Arnab Goswami.
Yes, I am. I've had a long day. I've had a long day, but
Yeah.
nevertheless,
But this was wild, bro. This is
people had
like
dreams of seeing Elon Musk with Nitin
with
Gadkari,
me
Sundar
on the
Pichai,
same stage. I was all like,
Gautam
wow,
Adani,
kya
Crown Prince of
imagination hai.
Dubai. मतलब क्या सोचा, क्या मिला?
Yeah, full on.
But I didn't see any of the ads. Did you see any of the ads? Because I didn't see any of them.
I obviously am not being targeted by scammers, which I am very grateful for. But this
Yeah,
was wild. So, guys, if you have been, living under a rock, the most ridiculous thing happened. There was a World Startup Convention where basically the organizers took like 10,000 bucks from,
yeah,
little sweet attendees who wanted to attend from all parts of India with the promise of, Elon Musk, Nitin Gadkari, this, that, and the other. As it turns out, and as one would expect, had they just opened their eyes, this whole thing was basically some version of a sham. There was no event, not enough, not actually, there was an event, but not even like 10% of the investors who were promised were there. There was no Elon Musk. There was literally no Saudi prince, Gautam Adani, or any of these other guys. And now there's this whole furor happening on the internet ki ho,
yeah.
kaise, kahan se, Fire Festival Part 2. So that's just context setting for our listeners in case they haven't got
And
the
did you
link.
see what the so while there's an entire FIR that happened, cops have gotten involved, etc. And the organizers, whose names are Arjun Chaudhary and Luke Talwar,
Hmm,
they actually gave a statement saying, we, if you look at what we put out, we didn't say they were confirmed. We said they've all been invited.
that's
Which
amazing.
almost like random statement. Like I will invite anybody, right? And when I put them on the poster, like, come on my podcast tomorrow. There is Steve Jobs, but like
That
I sent
was,
an
yeah.
invite.
We
Yes,
should
but
do
he's
that.
not there. Yes, I should just
We
do
should
those things.
totally do that. I am Steve Jobs, guys. I am Steve Jobs. Not that he
That
sounds
is
like
not
that, but
how.
in any case.
That is exactly what I was going to sound. Why is Steve Jobs sounding like that? But I think the other part of this whole piece was they obviously used a bunch of digital influencers, kind of promote the whole piece. You had Ankur Wariku, Chetan Bhagat, Rachmani, you had your Praful Chaiwala,
Hmm.
Biloria, if his last name I pronounce it right, all kind of put out videos about it. So they've received a large amount of backlash saying you promoted this and it turned out to be a scam. While
Not
I,
the first time. Not the first time. It's
there have been
happened to
statements
Ankur
that have come
Waliku.
from Ankur and from Raj. Both of them put up statements saying this was not something while they had made this, they had not finally approved it to go live.
Hmm.
But the convention guys still took it live, is what their statements largely say. But I think there's a larger lesson here on two fronts. On one front, for startup founders, that when something does seem too good to be true, it generally is. So there was actually
Yeah,
I was watching a news piece on this, and I think one of the this one founder who said that they've each had to pay I think 6 to 7K each to get their tickets. So the two co-founders, so they had to
correct.
pay like that much, and they were then getting like calls saying, "Why don't you get yourself a booth for 25K or 30K?" And they said that's when they kind of felt like, okay, this is a scam, and there's no
Yeah.
way we're getting our money back. So they just didn't even attend the event. And that
Smart
kind of
guys,
show.
smart
Yeah.
guys.
The
Learn
other
the
one
hard
is
way.
is for influencers, right? One is obviously, we all talk about the responsibility that you have for what you're putting out and what you're saying yes to. But I think the larger piece here is that I feel due diligence is becoming more and more important these days, because you have a
Hmm.
lot of these briefs come in, and you many times want to say yes because the money seems great and they seem reasonably legit.
Yeah.
Um, and because I'm sure many times you say yes to these things even before you know who the final speakers are for a lot of these events.
Yeah.
Because you just get, look at, are these people legit? You look through their LinkedIn, you look through the company profile, it seems fine, let's go ahead with it. But I feel that maybe larger due diligence is required in general, because it does affect the one core thing you need as an influencer or a creator, which is trust with your audience.
Legitimacy.
And this
Correct.
takes that away.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big learning here, is the fact that, as much as I know a lot of these people, like, I know both Ankur and Raj personally. I know their teams do diligence, but sometimes, especially for events, your info comes
Stuff falls through
so
the
much.
cracks.
Yeah, the info comes much
Yeah.
later. Like, you don't like. I've gone to events where I was told X, Y, and Z were on the panel with me till
Hmm.
the day before, and then I'm told they're not there. So I just have some other people on it. But you committed, so
Jeez.
you go.
Yeah.
Um, because I didn't want to ghost. But I've known a lot of people who say, no, I'm not going. Um,
Yeah.
and it's that choice you have to make. So it's a tricky
Yeah.
one. But I think in general,
And I think
yes,
Ankur's also generally improved, because I remember there was some other thing that happened in the middle, some
the crypto piece.
crypto, yeah, where he got called out and he also apologized.
And
He's
he
generally
lost
pretty
money
good
as well.
about these.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what he said. But I think most of these guys aren't totally out of whack about these things, because they also realize so much of their 27 crores of revenue, or however much Warwick crew made last year. A lot of it is dependent on how seriously he's taken.
yeah, that's totally it. And Chetan Bucket doesn't care, I guess. I'm just letting that one slide.
Chetan
Um,
Bhagat is just like, buy me a t-shirt that has sell out written on it, guys, and I will wear it.
Although, have you seen his podcast? Chetan Bhagat has a
What is this
podcast.
podcast?
It
Who
is a
doesn't have a podcast? Can we
Everybody
just
has a
say
podcast.
we were here first? Varun was here before everyone else.
Yes, I
I
was the
was
only
second.
person with a mic. Amit Doshi came into India with the mic when people didn't have mics. That's how mics came to India.
Yeah, Amit Doshi was there before all of us. He's like,
He made the
what's it
mic
called?
out of
Big Bang.
out.
Big Bang Theory started with him.
Cyrus Rocha once told me that Amit Doshi actually made a mic out of stone when the cavemen were here. That's how podcasting started.
Oh my God, totally believable. But with
Yes,
that, has this long ass episode finally come
we
to
have
an
we
end?
have
Can I go?
final. Where what are we talking about? We're talking about recommendations. Oh wait, one thing. What we're talking about is what we do at the beginning of the show. This is the ending of the show. What's your recommendation?
Have you noticed this? I'm not going to answer your question already. Have you noticed this pattern? When I am sleepy, I just
Uh,
don't talk. Like I'm just like, "Aapko jo bhi bolna hai bolo." When Varun is tired, he is like Shatabdi. He is like a jolt of conversation,
yes, I believe
flying
yes.
through the episode. No, but getting back to guys, Succession is back.
I still haven't seen
Wow.
because I will not do pirates.
Oh, acha, okay. You're sweet. I'm not. But Pirates ki jai. No, but I saw the first episode. In full honesty, I fell asleep like literally 10 minutes before it ended, because I have had the world's most brutal week last week in between Delhi, Bombay travels, this, that, and the other. But Succession is back, guys. Succession is back. And Uncle Greg is killing it as usual. What is
Amazing.
your recommendation?
My recommendation actually is a show which you've recommended before, but I finally got onto it. It's a show called
Ha!
Shrinking.
Happens
Um,
all the time. Have you noticed
it's
this?
quite
It's like a
nice.
pattern.
It's quite
I
nice.
told you to watch Fleischman is in trouble. Then 3 weeks later, you're just like, hey guys, my recommendation is Fleischman is in trouble. And then I told you to watch Shrinking, and then your
One second, you
recommendation is,
recommended Succession already last week, by the way.
oh, I'm recommending it again. That's how
That's
strongly I believe in this recommendation, guys.
okay, fine. Okay, fine. She's second recommendation supposedly she wants. Jalasmi is telling
Oh,
us that we can't recommend.
okay, Jalasmi wants a second. Guys, please go the same way you were obsessed with NMACC content. Please go watch content from Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. Wow. Vataj.
I
I
want to
have
recommend something. I
what?
want to recommend having a friend like my friend Rohit, who's a halwai by profession. Because whenever I feel like I want to eat something sweet, I message saying, "Do you have some halwa at home?" And he always has halwa at home for no
He has
reason.
halwa at home. Oh my
He
God,
always has.
halwa is my favorite food. What's your
Yes.
favorite halwa? Moong dal.
I like the jujube one, the that jelly kind of one with the
Hi. Who has jelly halwa, bro? Gross.
that jellish, that orange one, which looks almost like it's been made out of some radioactive material.
I don't know what you're talking about. The moong
But I
dal
like all
halwa is
kinds
the
of
best.
halwa. All kinds of halwa. Even moong dal halwa is amazing. But
Yeah.
all kinds of halwa are good. But yes, have friends like Rohit who are halwais by profession. Rohit, if you're listening, which I know you sometimes do on this show, well done. I think that's
Rohit,
the
if you're
profession
listening,
we need.
please send halwa to Delhi. I will happily take it.
Done. But that's it for this episode. I'm going to go crash, fall on my face, and
Yay!
wake up at 5:30 in the morning.
Lovely. Sounds delightful. I'm going to crash. Full
Bye,
stop.
guys. Bye.
Toodles, friends.
Jeddah, ikde.
Oh my god. Go to sleep, Varun. Go to sleep.